And I think without further ado, it's our absolute honour to be joined today by Tom Tom De Wilton from the Saunaverse. We've just been discussing how notorious Saunaverse has come and how many people from around the world know about Saunaverse already. But Tom, tell us, what is Saunaverse?
Oh, thanks, Jake. The Saunaverse is the UK's first and only sauna festival. So we offer a biannual festival at the Hackney Wick Sauna Baths in London, in East London. We take over the whole site and we bring in extra saunas and sauna facilitators, sauna masters, to really offer an insight into this booming UK sauna culture and a place for community to gather and to celebrate and enjoy good sweat.
Wicked. So how did this idea come about? What was your journey to discovery with sauna?
Yeah, well, I run a music festival, so I have a background in festivals, and I was in a startup which I left back in 2022. Found myself in a bit of a dark place, and I was spending a lot of time at the Hackney Wick Sauna Baths. I found that sitting in a dark sauna with friendly strangers was really good for my mental health.
Yeah,
and it was back when they just had 2 saunas, so it was really in the early days. And I know that my medicine, the way I heal myself, is by building stuff. I used to build tree houses as a kid, and then did that professionally. I'm a trained engineer, so that's my real background. So Charlie, Rob, and the directors of the Hackney Baths needed some new saunas. So I said, look, I need to build something. You need some more saunas. How about we do it? We work together. So I was over Christmas. It's down at kind of -3 degrees, building what's now Halco for any sauna regulars at Hackney, one of the first horsebox saunas for there. And I'd got to know Neil, who is the landlord of the sauna baths, and it just felt like there was a moment of magic that could happen where I was seeing this big kick in the sauna culture in the UK. I know how to run festivals. I'd become friends with these amazing people that were running the saunas, and there could be something there. So I put it out there. A lot of negotiation, specifically around nudity and alcohol, which of course traditionally for us Brits are 2 potentially problematic elements. And that was something I was really determined is like, we've got to have nudity and we've got to have beer. We've got to demonstrate that we, the British public, can be responsible with those things in the context of sauna.
Great. So is there nudity at Saunaverse?
There is, yes. So we have one sauna.
How do you manage that?
We have one area that is the clothing optional area. So
Okay.
it's not the German textile free. It's you're welcome to be naked. So anywhere in the whole site, people of all genders are welcome to be topless or free the nip, but just in one area, in one sauna. And it's one of our big event saunas. So 3 of the saunas that can seat more than 20 people, are our ritual saunas. So this one, we tend to focus on Aufguss. And within the sauna and the immediate area outside, people can be naked. Then we ask as soon as they come into the main festival area, and we have some of our wonderful volunteers just reminding people, because when you've got sauna brain, you forget to put your swimmers back on.
Yeah. So what can a sauna goer expect from attending? Saunaverse?
Well, I'm still trying to work out how to answer this question. and then we've just done our 3rd one about a month ago.
Yeah.
So we're learning every time. But it's 12 hours long, and within that you get unlimited sauna. So we have 10 saunas, all of which either have scheduled rituals within or are just kind of free use, including a quiet sauna. So if you want your meditative, introspective time. So, if I was a guest of Saunaverse, I'd come in and probably get changed into my swimmers straight away. Might be a sauna yoga class with Wendy from the British Sauna Society, maybe a sauna sound journey, maybe a Lithuanian Pertis treatment, or a workshop of actually how to deliver the Pertis, maybe a German Aufguss with Chris Bradshaw, famous sauna Iceman from Hackney. And the way that works is it's a first come, first serve. So I'd be queuing up, waiting for a session. Hopefully I'd get a seat inside. We managed to balance that really well when most people were able to get in. Then there's live music. So in the morning we have bands. We then transition through bands into DJs in the afternoon and evening. So you might go and watch some music, grab a beer, grab some food from one of our food traders. Amazing homemade vegan pizzas on site.
Wow.
Then we have the big event hall. So we're at the Bathhouse in London, which is an incredible community space, really. So traditional, normal, quote unquote, yoga in the morning. And then this year we had Hannah, one of our UK Aufguss champions, came and delivered a how to Aufguss workshop.
Wow.
So we had everybody wafting their towels inside the hall from one of our very cherished Aufguss masters.
That's really cool.
And people were then, of course, invited to demonstrate their skills in the sauna later.
I imagine it was a room full of people discovering that it's actually way harder than it looks.
Way harder than it looks. Way harder than it looks. And then we really took inspiration from the UK Sauna Summit run by the Brit, which was just the highlight of the year, really. So and we had a few talks. So Mika and I had Mika from original co-founder of the British Sauna Society, and I had a chat about UK sauna culture. Charlie Duckworth, one of the founders of the Community Sauna Bath, talked about the Community Sauna Network, his latest initiative to drive more community saunas around the UK. And then I spoke about how to build saunas, which is my real passion.
Yeah.
Nice.
So with events like this, how do you manage things like safety, hygiene, etc.? So, whenever I think of festivals and I think of sauna, we were discussing this on a previous podcast. Firstly, everyone always says, actually, it's not a problem at all. But your mind goes to, the worst places that you can imagine.
Because it seems like quite an impractical.
Yeah. So in practice, I know you'll probably say, actually, it's completely hassle-free or whatever. But, things like, do you have to have first aid on site, security? What does that look like behind the scenes?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this was the big negotiation before the first festival. Excuse me. And actually, we were really relieved that it's been really straightforward. And the main thing is that we're working with the team from the Hackney Community Saunas who are absolute pros. So our guests are in very safe hands. The way it works is that we come in, we take over the saunas, but the wonderful team are still running the saunas. So they're still cleaning them between all the sessions. They're still maintaining the level of safety. We then compound that with our volunteer team who, as I mentioned, are kind of checking the nudity area. We have a team of sauna angels wearing fluorescent wristbands who are there from a welfare perspective. So if you were to feel uncomfortable or unsafe or needing some support or maybe you've just got too hot, you've got someone to talk to, we bring in external first aid to have that extra level, even though we have defibrillators on site. That's really around the cold plunge. So we have Raider from Ice Tribe UK who comes in and does, I think this time it was 2 degrees. So some really, and of course with big contrast therapy like that, there is an increased risk.
Yeah.
So that's the main reason that we bring in our first aid team is for those moments. And the alcohol, of course, is an increased risk factor. So our team are watching, our bar staff are watching how many drinks people are buying. What we've found is that actually being drunk in a sauna is quite self-limiting.
Yeah.
If you've ever been drunk and gone in a sauna, it's probably the worst place you want to be.
Yeah.
So actually, it kind of looks after itself.
Yeah.
And it's the vibe of the event is that very much adopting the European approach of, maybe a beer or two, but it's not getting absolutely
trolleyed.
Great.
Great. So for anybody thinking about sauna events or planning sauna events, is there any little nuggets of advice, anything that you've sort of learnt along the way that you think you perhaps weren't aware of before? Or
Oh, yeah. Well, I think the first thing is like loads of stuff. But any sauna event is better than no sauna event.
Yeah.
And, I'd say, like we were talking about outside, we've been to some amazing ones this year.
Yeah.
Bad Stew Fest in Norway. Unfortunately, I missed this year, but that's up there. The World Sauna Forum in Jyväskylä in Finland was the other end.
Yeah.
So I would say if you're thinking about, just go for it.
Yeah.
It's going to be amazing. From my perspective, I think with these bigger events, it's all around sauna capacity. So actually, how many seats have you got? Because, of course, if you're running a business, the numbers have got to stack up.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I get approached quite often to say, will you come and run a Saunaverse at our site? And I say, I'd love to, but we need at least 50 sauna seats.
Yeah.
We need 50 sauna seats. I work on a ratio of 1 to 3. So if we had 150 guests, we need 50 sauna seats.
Yeah.
So at the Hackney Baths, with our 10 saunas, we have 112 sauna seats. So then we can have about 300 people on site. So we've worked that out, that seems to give... So the saunas are full. You still have a great atmosphere so that when the bands, it's really important that the bands and the DJs have a good crowd, have people dancing. It works for the food traders. It works for the bar. It works for our other traders, works for our partners and our sponsors. And there aren't, unfortunately, that many sites yet.
Yes.
They're coming, and I can't wait.
Yeah.
But there aren't that many sites that can make it work on that sense.
Yeah. Do you think the 1 to 3 ratio is the absolute optimal, or do you find, again, at Saunaverse, are there people ever waiting, or if they are, is it pretty chill, or
we got it last time we had a lot of queuing. We had less rituals, more open sauna space where people could just hang out. But the consequence of that was some people missed out.
Right.
And were disappointed.
Yeah.
So this time we really upped the number of sauna rituals, the sauna master sessions, the sauna workshops, life drawing, Saunaverse with Barry Sykes, some of these really... Because something we're really passionate about is not being too serious.
Yeah.
We have this amazing opportunity to help define UK sauna culture. So... we're a little tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
And my favourite was the sauna disco.
Yeah.
Which was just unbelievable. A perfectly curated disco playlist in the sauna.
Wow.
35 people dancing with a disco ball.
Wow.
And then a conga line that was from the sauna out to the main stage, past the DJ and back into the sauna. Wow. It was just... And if you did that in Germany, there might be some raised eyebrows.
Yeah. And if you did it in Finland, there definitely
very much so.
Yeah. But that's an interesting point you've touched on there, and we sort of find ourselves discussing this more and more, which is UK sauna culture is beautifully undefined, and that's where in these cultures like in the US and in Norway as well, and to an extent in Japan, we're seeing a boom, and we're seeing a boom because they are not, they're not burdened by a tradition that must be abided to. So it almost gives rise to this experimentation or this play around what it could be, and then not feeling like you're disgracing your ancestors by doing something that's new and novel. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and nothing ventured, nothing gained. So it's great to see that.
With that in mind, what when you're at the beating heart, the pulse, what have you picked up on which seems to be the unifying kind of theme amongst the early adoption of or formation of a British culture?
Ooh, yeah, good question. I think Aufguss is really... When I first came into the sauna world, it was all about leaf whisking and Pertis, but that seems to have... Because people are stepping more into these bigger event saunas, and anything leaf whisking is relatively one-on-one, whereas Aufguss, this shared experience of getting as many people into this hot box as possible, and then having this ritualistic experience of focusing on the sauna master, and then the sauna master taking a large group on a shared journey, for whatever reason, seems to really resonate. Chris's sessions on a Sunday night in the Hackney Baths are always sold out. Then he does his other clothing option ones at other sauna sites in London. So I'd say Aufguss is a real trend. And of course, we have the UK Aufguss Championships that then went and performed at the World Champs, which I think you guys were at.
Yeah.
So I think that, but then also I'm just seeing so many different things popping up, which, we have the Hackney guys have a queer sauna poetry session, and it's like, how has that come about?
Yeah.
But essentially, in the same way as why many people fall in love with sauna, you have no titles. You could be set next to a CEO, an artist, a journalist. You don't know because they're just in a pair of swim shorts or a bikini or a swimsuit. And that seems to translate into any sort of shared experience where there's something about the vulnerability, the connection, and the time limit. You can't be in there for 2 hours. You've probably got 15 minutes tops. So it kind of works well in these interesting experiences.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. You kind of touched on something, we've been talking about on the podcast for a while, which is, the sense of community in a culture that, despite a very high population, has a big problem with loneliness, has a big problem with building new relationships and building friendships. And when you compare, say, our grandparents' generation, they had probably the church, community groups, I sort of jokingly call them the village green preservation societies, and pubs. A lot of the men would go to the pubs every single night. And now, people don't want to drink that level. A lot of people can't afford to drink at pubs every night. And I think this gives people a sense of community. I've never been into a sauna where people haven't just started talking. And I see that even in terrible hot boxes with the hidden heaters, super dry, no water allowed to pour on the stones, this kind of archetypal old English adoption of sauna. And if I'm ever sat in one of those quietly, people come in and then they'll just say, "Oh, so what brings you here?" And suddenly this conversation happens in a sauna space, and I just think that's great. And I think it seems to be a place which brings people together, and to have that in a festival environment as well. I mean, it must almost be too loud in some of those sometimes.
Yeah. You can't hear yourself think.
Yeah. So have you thought about you talked about other people asking you to do other sites. Have you talked about taking this on the road internationally, or?
I've had some conversations. I think we're a little way away from that because, of course, needing the big capacity, often what we do is we bring in our own saunas. So the other part of the Saunaverse is long-term sauna rentals.
Yeah.
So I build these big commercial saunas with my guys, my freelance carpenters, and then we empower entrepreneurs to either start or scale their own businesses by renting them these saunas. So the idea being that they don't either need to build the sauna themselves or go out and find a big bucket of cash to buy a sauna.
Yeah.
So what tends to
overhead.
happen, is that we have these saunas sat in our yard, and we're able to bring them in for the festival, boost up the number of seats. So to do that overseas, we would need either a site that had a lot of saunas, or a partner that had a similar business model, or to bring in other saunas for rental, which gets very expensive because, of course, we have lots of amazing mobile sauna operators, but for them to close their business for a weekend, get the sauna to wherever we would need it, it's actually the costs. And I think this is the reason that we haven't seen a Finnish style mobile sauna festival in the UK yet. Yeah, because actually a lot of the Finnish mobile saunas, had this incredible trip to Finland last year where we managed to visit 56 saunas in 7 days with the one and only Sauna Sherpa and Mika and Wendy from the British Sauna Society. And we went to a mobile sauna festival where I think there was something like 22 mobile saunas, but they weren't commercial. These were people's
own trailers.
Yeah, they sat in the garden or they sat on the drive.
Yeah.
So there wasn't the financial barrier to getting them into one place. But I really hope that we can make that happen in the UK. And I think the way it would need to happen is some sort of, probably through the British Sauna Society, some sort of sponsorship deal where there was some money flowing in that could then offset the costs of the mobile sauna operators. Yeah. And we could bring everybody into one place, ideally on a lake or next to the sea. And then we could really embrace that spirit of Sauna Festival.
That sounds fantastic. And how about internationally? Because we were talking about this just before. I was at Sauna Days up in Minnesota on Lake Superior earlier this year. And the number of people who came up to me and were like, "Oh, do you know about Saunaverse?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." But it was remarkable to see that people internationally are already well aware of what you're up to and thinking it's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, the way I've thought that it could work is that instead of us taking the infrastructure, we take the people. So we take the sauna masters, we take the bands, the DJs. A lot of people are creating these really specific rituals for sauna. Yeah. So it could be the Saunaverse. We go and plug in with our team, with our people, into other existing events. Yeah. So that would probably be in the US because there's these amazing things happening in Minnesota and Minneapolis. Yeah. And if we could go over and take an offering to say, look, you provide the saunas, we'll bring the party. Yeah. That could be really special.
Yeah. I mean, you were out in the States. Let's talk about Burning Man.
What's your annual pilgrimage to the desert?
My annual pilgrimage is to Burning Man in the Nevada desert. So this was my 6th year just gone. Wow. But last year we had the real honor of joining the Black Rock Sauna Society. So the desert where Burning Man happens is called the Black Rock Desert, based on the mountains that overlook it. So we were really lucky. We went and flew out a couple of weeks early and joined a crew of Finnish burners. So a burner is a Burning Man person. And we spent a week in Reno, which is a casino city, the nearest city to
Little Vegas.
That's it, exactly. In this huge art warehouse where people go and build big pieces of art for Burning Man. And we took a 20-foot shipping container and we turned it into a 26-person sauna. Wow. With a ginormous Icky custom stove. Anyone that's seen the beautiful spiraling Icky stove. So this had a triple spiral. Wow. I think it was something like 240 kilos of rock. And then this thing we were building it right up to the last minute. We all went to Burning Man. The sauna got picked up on the back of a truck, taken into the desert, plonked next to the camp. And then this was the offering. So the way Burning Man works is there's no money. the only thing you can buy there is ice. You used to be able to buy coffee, but they've got rid of that now. So essentially this camp, the Black Rock Sauna Society, offered free sauna throughout the week of Burning Man.
Yeah.
So you could turn up pretty much any hour of the day, and they would have this sauna running at 80, 90 degrees, and you just stripped off, clothing optional. And of course, Burning Man it's a desert. It's very hot in the day, kind of 30, 40 degrees, very cold at night. So a lot of people think, oh, actually, that doesn't sound great. But it's a very dusty environment. So going in when it's kind of down at 5, 6, 7 degrees, it's a great way to wash.
Yeah.
A lot of people forget that it's sauna bathing.
Yeah.
That sauna is one of the most efficient ways to wash a large volume of people with very little energy and very little water.
Yeah.
So actually for Burning Man, it's just perfect.
Yeah. And how is water management there? I guess this year, famously, there was too much water.
Yeah, well, that was last year. That was the year when we had the sauna. So actually, this was the mud year where the entire world was laughing at us because we were there in this mud apocalypse, and we were all there having a great time, honestly. Because we go to Burning Man because it's hard, because we want to live out our apocalypse, end of the world fantasy, and then it got harder.
Yeah,
and we had a sauna to stay warm in. So I remember the night after the mud, trekking across the playa, that's what the desert's called, to get to the sauna. And then I was like, is it going to be on? Is it going to be on? I could just see the glow from about 100 meters of the icky stove. And I thought, okay, we're going to be okay. We're going to make this through. And of course, the whole thing was covered in sticky mud. But then you've got 20 happy people kind of, again, sharing in this sense of community inside the sauna.
Was it difficult to keep it clean if you got people coming in caked in mud? Or
Absolutely impossible.
Yeah.
But it's Burning Man, so
Yeah.
who cares?
And is there anything that you learnt from doing that was, any difficulties? I mean, you got to get a container into the desert. Did things turn up damaged, or did everything get there okay?
From a logistics perspective, it was actually really straightforward.
Right.
I'm actually about to start building a shipping container sauna for the Hackney Community Sauna. So having had a trial run has been great.
Yeah.
But the main thing was we were building a sauna that's going to be used for 1 week a year in the desert. And then the difference to building a shipping container sauna for
Permanent fixture
that's one of, if not the busiest saunas in the country. So we're really going into the technicalities of using spray foam insulation and off-gassing and having to seal that. So it's really, it was a good introduction, but I've been having some fascinating calls this last week with people that specialize in shipping container saunas because it's I've got to get it right. Yeah.
And it's one of those things, shipping containers, you see a lot of people converting them for pools or for accommodation, houses, all this sort of stuff. But then when you sort of drill down into it, people go, the thing about a container is it's not really ideal for any of those things. No. So you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole a little bit. But it's fascinating to hear. Is there anything that you took from Burning Man that you've applied to Saunaverse?
Good question. I think that would really be around the volunteer spirit, because of course Burning Man, everybody's a volunteer, and Saunaverse, we've found that the more that we empower our volunteers to have ownership of the event, to really get involved, then the more that they enjoy it, the more that they're able to give to it, and the smoother the event runs. So the way we used to do it is have our kind of core team of friends and people on the team. But now we tier it down where we have anyone that's volunteered with us once and that has essentially shown up and done a good job. They then get offered a volunteer manager position where they are then in oversight of the newer volunteers. And what that means is that there's more of a structure. It means that we as the core team can focus on what we need to be doing, the bigger problem solving, and things are always going wrong. And then everything else just runs. Yeah. So it's that sense of empowerment of, this is the schedule. Your role is to make sure that every sauna master has hot water, leaf whisks, towels, the sauna at this temperature. And people are smart. People are and if you give them the correct instructions and the authority to make it happen, they go and do it. And we've met some amazing people through this.
Great. Do you think there's a particular type of person that attends these festivals, or what's the demographic like?
Oh, it's a good question. They're different demographics. And actually, it's one of the challenges is how to tailor the festival to multiple demographics. We find that it's for sauna lovers, for people that just absolutely love sauna and they can't get enough of it and they want to come and sauna for 12 hours straight. And they want to talk to other people that want a sauna.
Yeah.
It's for sauna operators, and it's a bit like the UK Sauna Summit for people that are in this world and they want to network and to learn. And that was a big part of adding in the talks this year is intellectual knowledge exchange, and learning and visiting. And, we had people fly over from the US this time, from Albany Sauna, which was just an incredible honour, to come and see what we're doing and what's happening in the UK sauna scene. And then the third category or demographic is people that are curious. And I think that the UK is so interesting because we have this strong festival culture where we go to Glastonbury, we go to these big festivals, and when we're there, we're in a state of expansiveness where we try new things. And the Saunaverse is similar. It's people that maybe have taken a sauna once or twice, and they're kind of curious and they want to dip their toe. So they come in and they're like, "Ooh, I probably won't sauna. I'll bring my towel.
I'll just look.
Watch. I'll just have a beer."
Yeah.
And then by the end, they're there swinging the towel, sauna disco, dancing away. So it's almost like the gateway drug of sauna.
Yeah.
It's like, how can we get people in and show them what this is all about? Show them that it's totally accessible. It's not weird. It's not creepy. You don't have to be naked. No one's going to do anything you don't like. It's just a safe, beautiful, sweaty place that has all of these benefits that we know and love. So that's a big part of it, is how do we get the message out there?
Yeah. How about age demographics?
Yeah.
Do you find, is it mostly young people going to this, or?
I'd say main demographic is people in their 30s and 40s.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of but skewed all the way down from where we don't allow under 18s, unfortunately. That just gets a bit complicated with the nudity and the booze. But mainly 30s, 40s, but right the way up and right the way down.
Wow. Okay. Do you think? Sorry, go on.
I was going to ask. I know we were discussing about the kind of development of the London sauna scene a little earlier, off the record. But do you have any plans to branch out from Hackney and make the most of this burgeoning scene in London?
Oh, I'm not sure how much I can say on that. From my perspective, if anybody wants a sauna, I'm very happy to rent you one.
Yeah.
And I try and keep them as close to London as possible because if and when things go wrong, I can hop in the car and come and fix it.
Geography, yeah.
But it's just amazing to see, especially the South Coast. It's bonkers. And then the British Sauna Society has this interactive map. I'm sure you guys have seen it, and it's just incredible how many saunas. Whenever I'm now going on a trip anywhere in the UK, I check the map, and there's almost always a sauna. Yeah. A little, whether it's a horse sports on a beach or something totally different. So I'm up for anywhere, and it's amazing to see how many are popping up.
Yeah, obviously community sauna baths have got a few sites now as well.
Yes.
Is there any plans to do anything across multiple sites, or?
Do you mean events across multiple
sites?
sites?
For Saunaverse.
Well, I think the idea. So the next Sauna Festival is going to be on March the 15th, and as we were talking about earlier, we think that we'd love to get some more international visitors over.
Yeah.
But because the festival's just for one day, we're thinking about trying to sandwich it into a weekend. So having a bit of a kind of an operator's VIP sauna the evening before, and then on the Sunday offering a tour of London saunas. So, of course, we'd have the Hackney sauna on the Saturday, but then offering a tour around some of the different, to show the different ends. We've got these incredible bathhouses. We've got Sauna Social Club that's just opened in Peckham with this ambient sound offering. There's all sorts going on, and to really make it more worthwhile for international visitors to come across.
And you're based in London at the moment.
I am, yeah.
What's your current best kept secret sauna in London?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's on the cusp of it. It's the sauna boat.
Okay.
So there's an incredible man called Jam Jam, who anyone that has spent time at the Hackney Baths will probably have bumped into. And he is working on a project to essentially have a floating sauna, and it already exists.
Yeah.
And this is let's say a pirate sauna project.
Okay.
So this is the best kept sauna secret in London, and I think we'll be seeing a lot more of it. A very other end of the spectrum to some of the big fancy saunas, but an incredible project just built out of blood, sweat and tears.
Wow. So are you able to say where that is? Or
it is on the canal in Hackneywick.
Right, okay.
It's on the canal, and there's a new site where it's going to be offered, and it's really trying to mimic, the Oslo floating saunas, but bringing that to London. And it's so these are the beginnings of, we're seeing floating saunas all over the UK popping up, with Rob de Bank down on the Isle of Wight, and then Wild Sauna in Liverpool. And so it's going to be really exciting to see something happening in London.
I'm pleased to hear it's a boat. I mean, I have sort of this fear in my mind of badly balanced pontoons with capsizing saunas becoming. It's just the last thing we need, with an industry where there is risk and there is concern. And obviously, one of the first things we talked about today on the podcast was like, when people think for sauna festival, what could go wrong. I do look at some of the new emerging avenues of the industry, and I'm like, I really hope that we don't have disasters or anything like that. And I guess it kind of falls to us all to educate and not be afraid to sort of put up our hands a little bit and go, let's just make sure this is done properly, and engineers have been consulted, and thankfully with the work that you're doing and the experience that you've had in sauna festivals and festivals more generally, there's quite a good framework for progression there. So on the next one, so you've talked a little bit about the kind of the sandwich approach of how you might run it. Is there anything else that you're planning that might be a little bit different that people have to look forward to?
Yeah, I think we really want to lean into the talks and the education. That went down really well, and I think to try and collaborate and give voice to those people that are doing amazing work in the sauna, and like a bit like the platform that you're giving here with the podcast, is how can we get that knowledge out there? Because it's so interesting as this grows in the UK. We have lots of people that already know this stuff, and it's like, how do we get, is it, we've got lots of people that are Finnish or Latvian or Lithuanian or German that this is in their DNA. So I think we're going to really lean into that, and giving a platform, collaborative workshops, how to build a sauna, how to insulate a sauna. That's really my passion. Is we want to do some practical things of how do you use a nail gun. Actually, how does it work? What the one piece of kit that you probably don't have at home that you need to do some paneling is. What is a nail gun? How does it work? My insurance is not going to be happy with that, but I've got a pretty high tolerance for risk.
And I'm sure there's plenty of nail gun experts that you can draw on. And I know we kind of touched on this at the beginning, but I'm really fascinated, as with all of our podcast guests, to understand your journey of sauna discovery. So you talked a little bit of Hackney Wick, etc., but talk us through that sort of how you became aware of it, what made you decide to go and try it.
So I was terrified of sauna, and I was terrified of sauna because I was terrified of taking my clothes off in front of my friends. There was a deep fear there. I think the last sauna before I got into it I was probably 8 or 9 at Centre Parks, and I just thought it was weird and hot and gross, and so it wasn't on my radar. I would never go to the sauna in the gym. It just wasn't appealing. And it was during one of the breaks in the lockdown, so I think it's 2021, and I'd seen Beachbox on Instagram, and I just thought, that is cool. My grandma was a farmer, so I grew up around the old battered horse boxes. I was like, that is a great, for us it was chicken sheds, so that is cool. And a friend, Nicola, called me up, and she said, Tom, you used to build tree houses. Do you think you could build a sauna? And I was like, well, if I watch 10 hours of YouTube, I can pretty much build anything. So let's do it. And she had done a bunch of research already. And so we went and built this beautiful cedar-clad sauna in her garden shed in London.
Wow.
And it was this amazing project where I brought my tools up from, I was living in Oxford at the time, and I showed the gang of friends, some of who I'm still really close with, how to use the chop saw, the rip saw and everything. And we panelled out this sauna, put in a little Harvier M3 stove, which most people have heard about. And it was a brilliant project. And I'll be really honest, I was like, we're going to use this sauna when we finish it, and everyone's going to be naked. And I don't want to be there. So I had this whole plan in my head. I was like, okay, I'm going to make up an excuse. And when we get to that point, I'm going to get in the van, drive back to Oxford. And of course we finished it, and we're having pizza, and it was like this big amazing, okay, we're going to fire it up. Okay, it's at 40, it's 50, it's at 60 degrees. I was like, I can't, it would be so weird if I left right now. I was like, okay, I've got to do it. And it was fine. And it wasn't just fine, it was amazing. And like sitting with a bunch of friends naked in a sauna in North London, and I got it for the first time. I was like, wow, this feels really good. I feel really connected. It's just a beautiful experience. going outside and spraying each other with the hose. And I left. I was like, okay, well, this is
Wasn't
a
as
thing.
bad.
No,
Yeah.
it wasn't bad. It was
Yeah.
it was good.
Yeah.
And then quite quickly moved to London, started hanging out at the Hackney sauna baths. And I mentioned I was in this dark place where it was just deeply healing.
Yeah.
And a bit like the equivalent of going to the pub.
Yeah.
I knew I could go to the sauna baths, and I could, if I wanted to, have a nice conversation.
Yeah.
Probably make friends.
Connect with people.
Yeah. And I just like, this is something. And I could see that the sauna thing was, I was seeing what you guys were doing up here, and just something was happening in sauna. And there's been I'm an entrepreneur by nature, and I've watched these trends come and go, and always thought, God, I wish I'd got in. So that was where, okay, this is the moment. Let's start something and just kind of watch this wave ride. And it's just, I think it's only just beginning.
That's it. And I think, you talk about things coming and going, and I think, we see it in this industry and in parallel industries that there tends to be a boom and then a bust, or a boom and then it all sort of dissipates. What's different about this industry is it's not faddy in the same way. There are certain fad elements of it, and we see the rise and fall in popularity of the infrared movement, which was heavily driven by social media influencers and all sorts of let's say unorthodox marketing approaches. The difference with this is people do it, and they love it, and they really want to keep doing it. And it is addictive, and there is that community aspect of it. And so we see the build in sauna has been a lot. It hasn't been boom and bust because it hasn't really boomed in the same way. People talk about hot tubs during COVID period. Everyone bought one and then they didn't use it, and then it just sat there and then just reminded them every day that they didn't use it. And even to an extent, the cold plunge movement, which, with the work that Wim Hof did and all of the these breath work and cold plunge enthusiasts, there was sort of a period where it just went crazy, and then everyone who wanted one got one, and then it all sort of leveled out. Whereas a sauna is a more considered purchase.
Yes.
It's not something you can wake up tomorrow easily and just say, right, I'm going to have this by the end of the week in my garden. Even if you're getting a barrel sauna, you've still got to, you've got to order it. It's got to come. You've got to build the thing. You've got to fire off the stove, everything else. Yeah. It's much more considered. You've got to have the space to do it. And so the journey of discovery tends to be a lot more touch points with commercial facilities like you've talked about, all the way to the final decision of actually, I really want this in my life on a daily or, on a regular basis. So, when you say it feels like it's just beginning, I'm completely with you. And I think the exciting thing about this market is actually we were in the bottom of the trough. If you look at the history of the British public and bathing, even until the sort of 1950s, there was a strong Turkish bath community in this country. There was thermal bathing, and it's Mikel Arland talks about that it just continued to grow and get exciting up until the 70s, when the AIDS pandemic hit, and nobody knew what was causing it. There was this association with gay saunas and the prevalence of HIV in that community, and then everything just disappeared. And really, there was a huge loss of knowledge and experience. And I think now people are kind of going, oh, actually, this is something that we all used to do and was part of our culture in some way. And ironically, certainly when you look at things like the Turkish bath movement, or people modelling spas on Roman bathing things, it's all modelled on someone else's culture, which is a very British thing to do. And the rebirth now is like, well, we've got people who like Finnish sauna, and people who like Lithuanian pirtis, and people who like German Aufguss saunas, and that's great. Like, more different types of experiences, I think, coming. So
yeah, and I suppose that's the great thing with a few little hardware tweaks. The scale of your event sauna at Hackney Wick, just adding that extra bit of height, allowing the multiple tiers, and all of a sudden you've got an Aufguss sauna.
Yeah.
Very, very minor flick of the wrist in the specification stage can have quite a profound difference in terms of accommodating an entirely different operating system and experience. Yeah.
Is there anything, again, so from your experience of building some of these, are there any sort of lessons learned or things that you now look at those spaces differently, things you might carry forward into the shipping container project?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For me, because of this rental model that I do, it's all about what could or will go wrong.
Yeah.
And especially, like you guys know, these big heavy duty commercial saunas get absolutely battered.
Yeah.
And not just by the bathers, by the guests. They're being cleaned continuously.
Yeah.
So I think what we've learned is what will go wrong.
Yeah.
And where will the water go that it shouldn't? Yeah. And that water is both in the form of a hose or a bucket or a mop, and it's also the sweat and the condensation
and the users. Yeah.
Yeah, and it will find its way into any place it shouldn't be. So really designing so that don't get a phone call at midnight to say, Tom, one of the saunas is broken, and then having to drop everything and drive across London with my tools to go and fix it. So yeah, a lot of that is about, for me, I have these really high skirtings. Often you see these in the big commercial spas where you might have 200, if not 300 millimeters from the floor to the bottom of the timber cladding.
Yeah.
Because actually, and we've done some funny slow-mo footage of this, a sweat drop from a top bench at 120 centimeters, actually when it hits a puddle will bounce back up almost 15 centimeters.
Yeah.
So any timber, and of course water absorbs into the end grain, and we've tried sealing that, but then you're essentially locking it in from the bottom. So it's these little things where it's had to go wrong, and I've had to rip out timber, spend a lot of money replacing it. And so it's those little bits. Doors are always just, anyone in a sauna game knows that doors are a nightmare. Yeah. So we now just use glass doors. So anything with timber is in my experience, probably going to
swell or twist. Yeah.
And then it's all about, well, what's the door fitting inside? Because that's got to be timber. Yeah. So then if your whole structure is going to warp and twist, especially if it's on a trailer. Yeah. So we use these rock solid IFA Williams trailers. Everything's brand new, so it hasn't been reversed into a gate post and has if you buy something off a farm, it's probably had something dropped on it or been dropped itself.
We found things like the use of aluminium door frames for commercial is quite good, so it stops any warping and twisting. And I think, like you say, it's constant iteration and improvement to the stage that now when we bring people internationally here and we start talking them through, when we do this for this reason, and you see a few weeks ago we had some Estonians here and they were in the workshop and they're like, oh, so why do you do it that way? And we explain and they're going, that's how we stop that headache. And so it's so nice from our perspective to see, like, nobody has the perfect one and nobody ever will. But to see that, like, iteration, development and, almost sharing of knowledge that, how do we make these things better, more robust, more durable? And also some practicalities about the understanding of usage and how nothing stays perfect forever. You'd never buy a car and drive it 100,000 miles a year and expect it not to need servicing. And so I think with the commercial operators and obviously with your customer base, I guess the important thing to note is they're probably going to need your servicing expertise. And the more successful they are, the more they need to kind of factor that in. Yes. We're still finding operators and people we speak to who they just don't even clean the facilities, and they're asking our team about quoting for projects, and one of our team will go out and look at it and be like, oh, so how often are you cleaning this? And they're like, well, we mop the floor every night. And we're like, okay.
Clean the top side of the benches where people are sat.
Yeah, they maybe.
You crawl under to look for like cable penetrations and stuff if you're retrofitting into an existing space. And I always feel like in that instance being like, you come here, crawl under this bench, look up. Yeah. And there's always we can always do better when it comes to that stuff. Just compared to what we see on the continent and the kind of rigor that goes on a daily basis. I think there's room for learning and improvement.
Germans clearly do hygiene very well. I mean, you don't even have to have been to Germany to assume that that's probably going to be the case. But it's certainly this year I've been to, like you touched on, a number of Aufguss events and Aufguss saunas, and been fortunate enough to be in Germany quite a few times. and I'm always just so pleased at how clean everything is. And for me, if you're in those relaxation experiences, for most of us Brits, and Barute, one of our previous podcast guests, was talking about British sauna experiences being quite Spartan and rough and ready. And I think that's something, that we could all take more seriously, and would lead to far less of those phone calls at midnight if servicing and cleaning is just, for commercial operators, and anybody listening to this who's a commercial operator, it's a constant thing. It's not when it breaks we'll give somebody a call. It's okay, what's the condition like? Is there something is something warping or twisting or cupping? And often failures don't just happen. There's a transitional thing, and the more aware you are and in touch you are with those facilities, I think the more you can minimize those issues. And my other piece of advice always to commercial operators is buy a load of spares when you
that's where your aspiration of doing like these workshops with how to even wield a nail gun. There's something about like the mechanical appreciation and sympathy that happens when you've put something together. You can visually maybe not everyone can do this, but you can visualize how something goes together, and when you realize that something is going wrong, you paint a mental picture of why that might be, and you go, ooh, perhaps changing X parameter would yield a positive outcome. Yeah. So I think that your work in that field will be
more
well spent.
Yeah. I think that's one of my favourite things about the UK sauna scene. I think it might have been mentioned on the pod. It's the mobile sauna WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
This kind of famed WhatsApp group started by Lewis and Kirsty. And the knowledge exchange in here is just remarkable. Yeah. So this is a group for sauna operators, and there's a bit of a backlog to get in because it's so popular. And of course, these admins are also running their own sauna businesses. But the number of questions that are asked around things like, okay, and I think I saw today, what cleaning product?
Yeah.
And it's one of the ones you guys sell.
Sauna cleaning.
And great. It's and then things like which stove, because of course you've got your sauna, the beating heart of the sauna is the stove. And there's a big part of education around, how to use these stoves. There's a lot of contention around which stoves you should and shouldn't use. Yeah. And the fact that they will break. Yeah. A wood-burning stove at some point will rust through. Yeah. And that's reflected in the warranties that are given by these producers. Yeah. Or the manufacturers. And this expectation that you spend £2,000, £3,000, and that will last forever. Yeah. Is simply not the case.
No. Yeah. And a lot of those sauna trailers, because everything is a compromise on space, we see that actually to specify a heater properly, you've got to consider computational volume, minimum safety distances to combustible materials, flue routings, what you can and can't do around having the flue, safety railings and everything else, and to in a really compact space to tick all of those boxes, you end up essentially having to choose a domestic grade heater. Yes. And because of that, the use case of that, the average domestic heater they say is like 3 to 4 uses per week, up to 4 hours. Yeah. These commercial heaters are on 10, 12 hours a day, all day, every day.
And you don't realize then until I was with shout out to Hannah Lilly. We were doing just a bit of maintenance training on like sweeping flues and whatnot. And actually in a lot of stoves there's such to get all the efficiency and the heat into the stones, the flue goes quite through a tortuous route above the firebox, so you have to prod and probe with the brushes. And it always amazes me how much ash settles in these little roots. And then you've got to think about, it's kind of like if you view it like your arteries and stuff in your body, and as that clogs up, the flow's reduced, and before you know it, you've got a situation where it
becomes runaway, because the ash in there, firstly, is insulative. Yeah. And secondly, you're going to have to, it's not going to draw as well. Yeah. So you're going to be trying to get it hotter and hotter and hotter. And so you're more likely to, burn through the heater in a much shorter period. So, yeah, I mean, any of those knowledge exchanges are always fantastic.
But that was
forum.
something firsthand that, in sweeping our domestic wood burning ones, a little bit of ash comes out, and particularly if we've left it a long time, which life gets in the way,
of course,
and you do. And I was surprised to see more. So I went primed with this kind of knowledge, and particularly with the scalability on some of these sites where they've used the barrels and popular heaters, the Navi Kuru, which is only domestic, and the gauge of steel isn't as it is on some of the bigger Navis. We swept those out, and it was like eye-opening.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know that is, as you say, it's a constant like area of how can we improve, and if anything, the whole heater manufacturer industry should have their eyes on these operators for like which of the designs works best. What do you find to be the most reliable?
Well, one of the things that I always found very remarkable was in some of the earliest sauna trailers that we provided equipment and materials for. I remember because of their particularly horse boxes, which are on a very small format, where the Navi Kuru had been used. So I remember a particular client had called up and said, this is burnt through in 3 years. And obviously they were a little bit upset that they'd spent it's an entry-level wood-burning heater, but they'd spent good money, and within 3 years it had burnt through. And I was on the other end of the phone like, that's remarkable.
Yeah, you've done really well.
And I was like, right, so you've spent this much on the heater, and so, for less than £1 a day, the power plant of your sauna trailer has delivered that. I was like, that's great. And I think that's the thing, you've got to look at those renewal cycles, particularly at commercial, and particularly, and this is where, sauna trailer hire is a good consideration, because if you're starting a sauna trailer business and you can't appreciate that there's going to be a need for renewal and investment, it's an unknown. And so if you're spending, 50, 60, £100,000 on a sauna trailer, in your mind, you're like, okay, that's me set for the next 15 years. No. And that's just not how it works. No. You've got to build in the servicing costs of that, the replacement parts, components, and these things, it doesn't matter how you use them. You can use them perfectly. Yeah. And we see it with issues that present themselves. We see heaters that the owners say, I use this every day, and we look at it like 3 years later and it's immaculate. Yeah. And then we see emails from people who go, I've had this 6 months, and it's like, and you're looking at it and you're like, how often do you use this? Oh, well, probably once every 2 weeks. And it looks like the world's worst commercial setup. And you just, either they're lying, which I don't think is the case, or it's just a matter of an element of luck. I think it depends, from batch to batch of sauna stones, where in the quarry it's extracted from elements, in terms of these things all come off a production line and they all look the same, and yet two heaters used in very similar applications in different parts of the world or the country, some of them can last decades and some of them seem to burn through in a fraction of the time. So there's so many little considerations, and a lot of it is education. A lot of it is, we try to educate ourselves as best possible. The Finns assume everybody's got a level of common sense that the world just doesn't have in this space. And I think, as this movement continues to grow with people like yourselves and ourselves, the big thing is just education, what we can learn, what we can, make sure that it's communicated effectively to customers, and then push our suppliers to communicate that as well more effectively. So that's certainly one of our biggest challenges, is getting Finns to, help everybody. Essentially, we're babies in this space, like completely naive. What should we be doing that we're not doing? So, those knowledge platforms, like you said, are really useful. And it surprises me though that hasn't become some sort of online forum or some sort of Reddit or something, because otherwise you get a new person on and then they ask all the same questions.
And I think this is something the British Sauna Society is looking at formalising. Nick Torrens, I know this is one of his baby projects, but it's as with any volunteer organisation, there's limited resources and things change. Things are changing so quickly. It's remarkable how a lot of this knowledge goes out of date. And 2 years ago, everybody was building horsebox saunas. And then for those same reasons that you meant, horsebox saunas are an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
Because you've got a wonky box with weird angles.
Yeah.
You have to build everything from the outside in because you've got you're limited by the existing wall. So it's really nice now seeing people adopting flatbed trailers with stud walls, and then if something does go wrong, you can take off the outside paneling. You're not having to rip off the internal expensive tongue and groove. So it's really interesting how things are evolving.
Yeah.
And
we're seeing it with suppliers as well. The iteration, with new manufacturers coming into the space with heaters and everything else, new ideas, new concepts. It takes something that people have assumed this is how it's always been, and it's been like this for generations in Finland. And people are innovating and iterating.
Actually, something I was surprised to see this year is there is a glimmer of hope that there might be a DEFRA approved wood burning
the
sauna
Holy
stick.
Grail.
Yeah,
the Holy
which
Grail.
it would for the longevity of these independent sites across urban areas.
Yeah.
It's like a real lifeline.
Yeah.
So. Watch.
No promises.
No promises because it's still going to go through the test.
But yeah, DEFRA, that DEFRA challenge is always an interesting one, which is in part because our testing mechanisms in the UK just are not considerate to the way that sauna heaters operate. And your average sauna heater is designed to put down as much energy as quickly as possible, whereas the test itself is designed more for indoor wood burners, which are actually about a much more slow and efficient burn. And the emissions standards are set for those low kilowattage domestic heating appliances, and not for something that's like trying to heat a room of 30 people all sat there expecting it to be 100 or 85 Celsius or something. So. Yeah, that's a glimmer of hope in the future. So do you have any sort of prophecy for what this space is going to look like? Obviously, your boots on the ground in London, the vibe, everything else. What do you think we should expect as we look forward in the future?
I think we're going to see a lot more bigger saunas, event saunas, sort of 40, 50 people. I think I'm really excited about that and kind of this idea of the more traditional Alfgus ritual, but then also this kind of unusual flavour of how can we use these warm spaces.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see a real mixture of sound and music and sauna. We've got William at Hackney doing these Saunaesthesia events, and I think with Social Sauna Club, with the ambient, I think there's something about the British consciousness of mixing music, curated music with sauna, that I think that's going to be a thing, which of course links to these sauna sites that we see at the festivals at Glastonbury, all of these big festivals in the summer. And I think a lot of grassroots facilitators coming up with weird and wonderful things that will be offered across the country, and some of them will stick and evolve and some of them will fall by the wayside.
Great. So let's round this off. So if people want to buy tickets to the Saunaverse or learn more, where do they go? You guys on social media, website?
Yeah, so we're at the Saunaverse on Instagram. That's our main channel of getting the message out there. And then our website's thesaunaverse.co.uk. And tickets will be on sale soon.
And what does a ticket set you back these days?
Oh, it depends. It's about £50 for the morning, £60 for the afternoon, or £90 for the whole day.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, this has been an absolute honour. Thanks so much again, Tom.
Thanks, Jake.
Cheers.
Thanks, Max. Thank you.